I want to touch on one more phrase from the source that we mentioned but didn't fully dissect. Multilateral. We defined it as involving many countries. But in the context of silence, how does that fit?
Well, silence often works best in bilateral one-on-one situations where you can have that quiet conversation. But when China pushes for multilateralism, it's often a way to diffuse the focus. If you are in a room with 20 people, it's much easier to blend in and stay quiet than if you're in a room with just 2.
So you use the crowd to hide the silence, or to make it seem less significant.
Or you use the crowd to dilute the criticism. If the U.S. criticizes China directly in a bilateral meeting, it's a confrontation. If the same issue is moved to a multilateral forum, like a UN committee, it becomes a slow, bureaucratic process. It lowers the temperature.
It turns a fistfight into a committee meeting.
Exactly. And committee meetings are famous for, well, not silence, but a lack of decisive action, which, again, can be a form of strategic stalling, silence by bureaucracy.
It's all about controlling the tempo of the game.
Controlling the tempo, controlling the volume, and controlling the narrative by refusing to participate in the narrative that others are trying to write for you.
That is a powerful idea. Refusing to participate in the narrative. If the media wants a story about conflict, and you give them nothing but polite, boring silence, you starve the beast.
And eventually the cameras go somewhere else.
Yeah.
Because they have to find noise, then you can get back to work in the quiet.
You know, we started this by saying this was material for advanced language learners, but I feel like I'm learning how to handle my in-laws at family gatherings.
The principles of diplomacy are universal. Sovereignty, that's boundaries. Non-interference, that's minding your own business. Strategic silence, that's counting to 10 before you yell at Thanksgiving dinner.
And face. That's not correcting your uncle's wild conspiracy theory in front of the whole family, even though you really want to.
See? You are a natural diplomat.
I don't know about that. I think I like the microphone a little too much.
Well, that is why you are the host.
Fair point. But looking at the source material again, there is a section on soft power versus hard power that mentions attraction. We said soft power is attraction. How does silence create attraction? It seems like a stretch.
It's a subtle point, but it's a good one. Think about this strong, silent type archetype in our own culture. There's a gravity to someone who doesn't speak needlessly. It projects confidence. If a nation is constantly screaming, threatening, cajoling, it looks anxious.
It looks needy, like it's trying too hard.
It looks insecure. A nation that speaks only when absolutely necessary and whose actions, the economic investment, the infrastructure projects speak for them, projects a kind of stability and reliability that can be very attractive to other nations, especially nations that are tired of being yelled at by other superpowers.
That's a really interesting angle. If you are a smaller developing nation and superpower A is constantly lecturing you on human rights and your tax policy, and superpower B is just quietly building you a bridge and saying nothing.
Superpower B looks like a much easier partner to work with, doesn't it? Yeah. That is the attraction of non-interference. It is a selling point. The implied promise is, we will do business with you and we won't give you a lecture.
That silence is a marketing strategy.
A very, very effective one.
It really flips the script on how we perceive good diplomacy. We tend to think good diplomacy is the moral crusade. But the source is arguing that efficient, effective diplomacy is often the quiet deal.
And that is the tension the source leaves us with. It doesn't say one is right and the other is wrong. It asks us to understand that they are playing different games with different rules on the same board.
And if you try to play chess with someone who's playing Go, you're going to be very confused.
And you are probably going to lose.
Well, I think we have thoroughly squeezed the juice out of this source material. From the deserts of Iran to the glaciers of Greenland and right back to the vocabulary flashcards.
It's been a journey into the sound of silence.
It has. And I hope for everyone listening, the next time you hear a phrase like strategic ambiguity, you don't just gloss over it. You realize it's a deliberate fog.
A fog designed to hide the next move on the board.
All right, this time for real, we are signing off. Thank you for diving deep with us.
Goodbye.
Catch you on the next one. Remember, sometimes the smartest thing to say is nothing at all. I see what you did there.
I couldn't resist.
See you guys.
I want you to picture something for a second. Imagine you're walking into a room to watch, I don't know, a movie about global politics.
A thriller.
Yeah, a big thriller. It's got superpowers, espionage, the whole 9 yards. Now, what's the soundtrack to that movie in your head?
Oh, that's easy. Drums. Lots of drums. Maybe some screeching strings. Something intense.
Right. It's loud, it's breaking news sirens, it's politicians at podiums yelling into microphones.
That whole breaking news banner flashing red at the bottom of the screen.
Yeah.
We equate volume with influence.
Exactly. We're conditioned to think that international relations is a noisy business. That if you aren't shouting,
You're not even in the game. It's the theater of the distinct, right? You have to make a big show.
You're not in the game. But I've been staring at the stack of documents you sent over for this deep dive, and we're talking trade reports, policy papers, infrastructure bids, and it's unsettling.
Else.
Because if you actually look at how the second largest economy in the world is operating right now, the soundtrack isn't drums at all.
It's
nothing.
It's dead silence. And that right there is what makes it so unnerving for Western analysts. We're programmed for the noise. We have a playbook for how to react to noise.
With silence.
But silence, that's different. So today we're diving into a concept that the source material calls strategic silence.
Strategic silence. It sounds like a mindfulness app, but I'm pretty sure we are not talking about meditation here.
No, not even close. We're talking about silence as a weapon, as a tool. The whole premise we're going to unpack today is that while, say, the U.S. and Europe are busy winning the argument, holding the press conferences, issuing the condemnations, China is busy buying the chessboard.
And we are not just going to float around in theory land today, which I appreciate. We have two very specific, very real case studies from this source material that really prove the point. And honestly, they could not be more different places on the planet.
Some serious whiplash. We're going to start in the scorching heat of the Persian Gulf. We'll be looking specifically at Iran.
Okay, so Iran first, and then?
Then we're going to pack our heaviest winter coats and head north, way north, to the ice sheets of Greenland.
Desert and ice?
Exactly. But the way silence is deployed to secure resources without triggering a major conflict, it's almost identical.
So the mission for this deep dive, for you listening along with us, is to learn how to hear that silence. We want to understand the mechanics of what the sources call quiet diplomacy. How do you, for instance, get around international sanctions without saying a single word about it? How do you try to buy a strategically critical airport in the Arctic Circle without setting off every single alarm bell in Washington?
And I think, crucially, the takeaway for everyone listening is how you can spot this pattern in the news tomorrow. Because once you see it, once you understand the framework, you start to realize that maybe the most important stories are the ones that absolutely no one is talking about.
All right, I'm sold. Let's get into it. Let's start with the heat. Let's go to the Middle East.
Let's talk about Iran.
Now, just looking at the top-level briefing notes here, the foundation of the China-Iran relationship seems, well, pretty obvious on the surface. It's one word: energy.
It is the absolute heartbeat of the relationship. You can't understand anything else about their dynamic if you don't start there.
But I want to get more specific, because energy can be a vague word. It gets thrown around a lot.
Yeah.
What are we actually talking about here in terms of scale and, I guess, desperation?
We're talking about survival. You have to picture China as the world's factory. It's not just a big economy. It's the largest energy consumer on the planet by a pretty wide margin.
So it's constantly hungry.
Constantly. They import something like over 10 million barrels of oil a day. Just think about that volume. Without that constant inflow of energy, the factory literally stops. The lights go out. Their entire economic model crashes.
It's not a preference, it's an addiction.
It's an existential requirement. And on the other side of that equation, you have Iran. Now, Iran holds, I believe, the fourth largest proven oil reserves in the world. So, from a purely chemical standpoint, these two countries are just drawn to each other.
It's a natural fit.
One is starving for fuel, and the other is sitting on a feast, but, and this is the key, isn't allowed to sell it to most of the world.
Right, and that's the big complication here, because technically, Iran is buried under a mountain of Western sanctions. It's not like you can just, use your credit card to buy 1 million barrels of Iranian crude.
Exactly. And this is the point where the silence stops being some abstract theory and starts being a massive, tangible logistical operation. This is where we get into what the source material calls the dark fleet.
I saw this term in the sources, and I have to admit, it sounds like something out of Star Wars, the dark fleet. So break this down for us. How does a global superpower buy oil from a sanctioned country without getting caught? Or, maybe more accurately, without admitting they got caught?
Well, the first thing is they don't use the normal channels. They don't use the standard, well-lit shipping lanes with easily trackable, fully insured vessels.
So no Maersk containers here?
Not at all. The source material details this huge sprawling network of aging tankers. These are ships that, on paper, might be flagged to obscure jurisdictions like Panama or Liberia, or in some cases, they're so old they should have been sent to the scrapyard years ago.
Okay, so they're using deniable assets.
Precisely. And when these tankers approach Iranian waters, they do something technically very simple but strategically brilliant. They just turn off their AIS transponders.
AIS, that's the little GPS thing that tells every other ship where you are, right?
It's the automatic identification system. It's what prevents collisions at sea. It's what allows global maritime traffic to be tracked in real time. They just switch it off.
They go with the grid.
They vanish from the digital map. They become ghosts. And then they'll load up the oil, often through risky ship-to-ship transfers in the middle of the ocean in the dead of night, specifically to mask the point of origin.
So they're not even docking at an Iranian port.
Sometimes they do, but often it's this more clandestine method. Then they'll sail towards China. But here's the real trick. When that oil arrives at a Chinese port, the bill of lading, the official paperwork, it doesn't say crude oil, origin, Iran.
So what does it say?
It's often rebranded. It might be labeled as a Malaysian blend or mixed with crude from Oman or Iraq to disguise its chemical signature. The paperwork is massaged, the origins are fudged. It's a massive, silent, gray market operation happening on the high seas every single day.
Here's the part I don't get.
Yeah.
We have satellites. We have intelligence agencies with fleets of drones. The U.S. State Department knows this is happening. The sources we're looking at say China is buying something like 90% of all of Iran's oil exports.
That's right, the vast majority.
That's not a secret. You can't hide that kind of volume. So isn't this silence just, I don't know, a polite fiction? Who are they actually fooling with this?
And that is the absolute brilliance of the strategy. They aren't trying to fool anyone. Not really. The goal isn't secrecy. The goal is what international relations experts call plausible deniability.
Okay, explain the difference. That sounds like splitting hairs.
It's a huge difference. Secrecy is about making sure no one knows. Plausible deniability is about making sure no one can prove it in a way that forces a public confrontation.
Oh.
Think of it like this. If China came out tomorrow and held a big press conference, if their foreign minister stood at a podium and said, "We are officially defying U.S. sanctions and buying Iranian oil because we don't respect your rules," well, what happens then?
That's a direct challenge. That's throwing down the gauntlet.
It's a direct challenge. It forces the U.S. to react. The U.S. president would have to respond to save face. It forces a conflict. It would dominate the news cycle.
So the noise itself creates the conflict.
Precisely. The act of speaking about it is the provocation. By doing it quietly, by using the dark fleet, by keeping it off the official books, by fudging the paperwork, China gives the United States an out. They allow Washington to basically look the other way because the transgression hasn't been shoved in their face on CNN.
It's like if you have a neighbor who plays loud music at 2 a.m, you have to call the cops. It's a public nuisance. But if they're, I don't know, running a quiet little gambling den in their basement...
You might know it's there. You might not approve. But as long as it doesn't wake up your kids or disturb the peace, you might decide you have bigger problems to worry about. And right now, believe me, the U.S. has plenty of other problems to worry about.
So the silence buys them the space to operate? It de-escalates the transaction from a political crisis into just a quiet business deal.
It keeps the oil flowing, which is China's primary goal, without triggering a diplomatic war, which they want to avoid at all costs.
This brings up another fascinating concept from the reading, the idea of China as a free rider.
Yes, the security free rider.
That phrase sounds almost like an insult. What does it actually mean in this specific context, in the Persian Gulf?
Well, it's not meant as a compliment, that's for sure. But it is a very accurate description of a very cynical and frankly very effective strategy. Just think for a moment of the security architecture of the Persian Gulf.
Okay.
Who keeps the Strait of Hormuz open? Is one of the most critical choke points for global energy. Who patrols those shipping lanes to make sure pirates or hostile state actors don't block the trade?
That's the U.S. Navy. The Fifth Fleet is parked right there in Bahrain. It's been their job for decades.
Exactly. The United States taxpayer spends billions upon billions of dollars every single year to project power into that region and secure those waterways. We ensure the freedom of navigation for the entire world. Now, who is the single biggest beneficiary of that security umbrella right now?
The Chinese oil tankers, the same ones that turn their transponders off.
The very same ones. They are sailing through sea lanes protected by American destroyers, carrying oil that fuels the Chinese economy, often from countries the U.S. is actively trying to isolate, and China pays exactly $0 for this security service.
That is, I mean, when you put it like that, from a purely cold strategic standpoint, that's an incredibly efficient use of resources.
It's genius.
Mm-hmm.
Why would you spend the fortune required to build a massive blue water navy to patrol the Gulf if your primary geopolitical rival is willing to do it for you for free? This is the absolute core of the strategy they call hedging.
Let's dig into that term hedging, because I feel like in the West, and especially in the US, we're obsessed with sides. You know, you're either with us or you're against us. It's a very binary worldview.
Right, it's black and white.
But the sources described China's approach to the Middle East not as taking a side, but as being omnidirectional, which at first glance just sounds like they're confused or indecisive, but I'm guessing it's far more calculated than that.
It's the roulette strategy, but with a geopolitical twist. In Western diplomacy, we tend to pick a number on the wheel. We back Saudi Arabia, so we are by default anti-Iran. We put our chips on a specific political outcome. We invest in alliances.
And if our number doesn't shit, if there's a revolution or a regime change, we lose.
We lose big. You lose credibility, we lose investments, we lose access. Hedging, or being omnidirectional, means you don't pick one number. You place a small chip on every single number on the board.
So you're guaranteed to win something.
You're guaranteed not to lose everything. So China has what they call a comprehensive strategic partnership with Iran. They buy their oil, they offer them a lifeline. At the same time, they have massive multi-billion-dollar trade deals with Iran's mortal enemy, Saudi Arabia. They host the Saudis for lavish state summits in Beijing. They sell advanced military drones to the UAE.
So they are actively arming and trading with everyone, even if those people are on the verge of war with each other.
Especially if they hate each other. Because, and this is another key distinction, China isn't trying to solve the conflicts in the Middle East. They aren't trying to be a peacekeeper or bring democracy to the region.
So what are they trying to do?
They're trying to extract resources from the Middle East.
Yeah.
And to do that, you need functional relationships with everyone who has something to sell.
That's a really important point. The West intervenes to fix things, or at least that's the stated goal. China intervenes to buy things.
Transactional, not ideological. That is the mantra you see repeated over and over in these policy papers. They do not care about the theological disputes between Sunni and Shia Islam. They don't care about the internal politics of the royal family in Riyadh. They care about one thing: the stability of the supply chain. Is the oil flowing today? Yes. Good. End of story.
But does this actually work for the countries on the other side of the table? I mean, let's look at that big Iran deal, this 25-year agreement that made all these headlines a few years ago. It was billed as this massive $400 billion investment, a game changer. But the sources we read suggest that Iran is actually, well, pretty frustrated with China.
They are deeply frustrated. And this reveals the potential flaw, or at least the friction, in this whole silence strategy. You have to see it from Iran's perspective. They are a pariah state right now. They're isolated. They're economically crippled. What they desperately want and need is a big brother.
They want a patron, an ally.
They want China to stand up at the UN Security Council and loudly veto American sanctions. They want a formal military alliance. They want Chinese firms to pour that $400 billion into rebuilding their dilapidated infrastructure. They want loud, public, unwavering support.
And instead, China gives them
silence. China gives them what the documents call strategic ambiguity. They signed the big, flashy 25-year agreement, which is great for headlines, and they quietly buy the oil, which is great for their energy security. But when it comes to the actual, tangible, on-the-ground investment in Iran's infrastructure, it's a tiny fraction of what was promised.
So it was mostly for show.
It was a signal. But politically, China keeps Iran at arm's length. They won't commit. They won't choose a side.
So Iran is basically the side piece.
That is a very brutal way to put it, but from a strategic perspective, yes. China will not fully commit to Iran because the moment they do, they risk losing Saudi Arabia, they risk angering the UAE, they risk secondary sanctions from the West that could hurt their access to more important markets. So they keep Iran just close enough to get the discounted oil, but quiet enough that it doesn't blow up all their other more valuable relationships.
It's an incredible balancing act. It must require an immense amount of discipline. You have to constantly say nothing, even when your supposed partner is screaming for you to speak up and defend them.
And that institutional discipline is what really separates their foreign policy from, say, ours in the West. Our politicians need to be seen doing something. They need to respond to the 24-hour news cycle. In this Chinese strategy, the victory is often achieved by consciously not doing something, by resisting the urge to speak.
It's fascinating. I mean, it is a total inversion of how we traditionally think power works. But okay, that's the desert. That's the game when the commodity is oil and the setting is, frankly, a potential war zone.
Right. It's a high-stakes, short-term game of survival.
So now I want to really test this theory. I want to see if this model of strategic silence holds up when we move to a completely different environment with a different prize and a different set of rules.
Let's put on our parkas. It's time to go north.
We are going to the Arctic.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about Greenland.
This is one of my absolute favorite geopolitical weirdnesses. It's just such an unlikely flashpoint.
It really is. I mean, for most of us, when you look at a map, Greenland is just this massive white blob at the top of the world. It has a population of, 56,000 people?
That's right. About the size of a small suburb in Ohio, as you said.
Exactly. But geographically, it's enormous. It's the size of Western Europe. And what's becoming clear is that in terms of what's in the ground and under the ice, it's a giant.
A sleeping giant.
The source material makes a really interesting distinction here about China's motivation. If the game in Iran is about immediate survival, getting the oil they need today to keep the lights on, Greenland is all about the long game.
Absolutely. This isn't about next quarter's GDP. This is generational planning.
Yeah.
We're talking about their strategy for the year 2050 and beyond.
And there was a phrase in these documents that honestly made me laugh out loud. China has started referring to itself in official papers as a near-Arctic state.
Which is, to put it mildly, geographically absurd.
It's ridiculous. I looked it up. The southernmost point of the Arctic Circle is thousands of miles away from Beijing. That's like me saying I'm a near Olympian because I jogged once last week.
It's a real stretch.
Yeah.
But they are pushing this definition aggressively in international forums, trying to get observer status on the Arctic Council. And you have to step back and ask the obvious question, why? Why is a country that is nowhere near the Arctic so completely obsessed with this massive, mostly empty, icy island?
And the answer seems to be two things, right? Resources and roots.
Correct. Let's start with the resources, because that's the more immediate prize. We talked about oil in Iran. In Greenland, the treasure is something called rare earth elements.
Okay, break that down. We hear the term rare earths all the time in tech news, but it's a bit of a black box for most people. What are we actually talking about?
We're talking about a group of 17 metallic elements, things with names like neodymium, dysprosium, terbium. They're basically the essential vitamins of the entire modern economy.
Vitamins, I like that analogy.
You literally cannot build an iPhone without them. You can't build the powerful magnets in an electric vehicle's motor or a wind turbine without them. And critically, you cannot build the advanced guidance system for an F-35 fighter jet or a Tomahawk missile without them.
So whoever controls the supply of these minerals basically controls the entire high-tech manufacturing sector and, by extension, the military-industrial complex.
In a nutshell, yes. And here's the current strategic reality. China controls somewhere between 80 and 90% of the global processing of these minerals. They have a virtual monopoly.
But they're smart. They know that eventually their own domestic mines will run dry, or more likely, the West will get serious about diversifying its supply chain to reduce that dependency.
So they need to lock down the next big source.
And geological surveys suggest that Greenland has one of the largest, if not the largest, undeveloped deposits of rare earths on the entire planet.
It's a treasure chest, just buried under a mile of ice.
For now. And that ice is melting. Which brings us to the second grand prize, the Polar Silk Road.
This is the new shipping route. As climate change continues to melt the Arctic sea ice, a new navigable sea lane is opening up across the top of Russia and Scandinavia for more of the year. For a shipping company in Shanghai, this route cuts the travel time to a European port like Rotterdam by weeks.
Weeks? That's a huge deal.
It's a revolution in logistics. It allows you to bypass the Suez Canal, which we saw can be a choke point. It allows you to bypass the pirate-infested waters off the Horn of Africa.
It is the ultimate global shipping shortcut.
It is the future of logistics. So if you're a strategic planner in Beijing, you look at Greenland and you see the perfect dual-purpose asset. It has the raw materials for the future economy, and it sits right alongside what will be the superhighway for future global trade. It's the gas station and the oil field all in one.
But there's a huge problem, a massive obstacle.
That's a very big problem, yes.
Greenland isn't some unclaimed territory. It's not independent. It is technically an autonomous territory, but it's part of the Kingdom of Denmark. And more importantly, it is arguably the single most strategic piece of real estate for the United States military.
It is the unsinkable aircraft carrier of the North Atlantic. Just look at it on a map. Greenland is the cork in the bottle between the Arctic and the Atlantic Oceans. If you have bases on Greenland, you can track every Russian submarine coming out of their northern fleet. You can control the air approaches to North America. The U.S. has had a major air base there, Thule Air Base, since World War II.
So this isn't just a business deal. This is a matter of high-stakes national security for the West.
It is the ultimate geopolitical trap. If China just marches in there, plants a flag, and says, "We're taking over your mining sector," the U.S. goes to DEFCON 1. NATO's mobilized. It's a non-starter.
So they can't use hard power, they can't threaten, they can't make loud demands.
Absolutely not. So they use soft power. And this is where the strategy of silence returns, but in a different flavor. They don't send generals or admirals, they send engineers and investors.
I really want to talk about the airport story from the source material, because this is the perfect real-world example of how this plays out. And this happened just a few years ago, right?
Yes, the main events were around 2018.
So, set the scene for us. Greenland needs new airports. They want to boost their tourism industry, they want to better connect their remote towns, but they don't have the cash to build them themselves.
It's a classic infrastructure gap. The local Greenlandic government wants them, but their patron, Copenhagen, wasn't willing to foot the entire bill. So the Greenlandic government does what anyone would do. They put out an international tender. They invite bids to finance and build these airports.
And who shows up to the party?
A massive Chinese state-owned construction company. They show up with a friendly smile, a slick PowerPoint presentation, a team of engineers, and most importantly, a very, very large checkbook. They essentially say, "We will build not one, but 3 of your airports. We will extend your runways, and we'll finance the whole thing with a low-interest loan."
And if you're a local politician in Greenland, on the surface, that sounds incredible. Hey, thanks for the free airport. What's not to love?
That's the seduction of it. That's the trap. Because in the Chinese system, as the documents make clear, there is no meaningful distinction between a private company and a state-owned enterprise, especially in a strategic sector like international infrastructure. The U.S. Department of Defense looked at this proposal, and they absolutely panicked.
Why? What's the specific fear? I mean, it's just a runway for tourists to land on, right?
It's all about what the military calls dual-use capability.
Okay, hold on. Dual use. We hear that term a lot. Break that down for us in this specific context. What does it actually mean for an airport?
It means that the same infrastructure that serves a civilian purpose can also serve a military one. If a Chinese state-owned company builds the airport, they might also control the logistics and air traffic control software. They might get the long-term contracts for the maintenance crews and ground staff. They might, just as a friendly gesture, build the runway just a little bit longer and a little bit sturdier than it needs to be for a tourist plane.
Long enough and sturdy enough for, say, a heavy military transport plane.
Or a long-range bomber. So the fear of the Pentagon was, today it's a hub for European tourists, but tomorrow it's a refueling station for the Chinese Air Force. Or at the very least, a permanent strategic listening post full of engineers who are maybe more than just engineers, sitting right in the middle of NATO's northern flank.
So the alarm bells in Washington and Brussels finally started ringing.
Oh, they rang loud and clear. The U.S. Secretary of Defense at the time personally called his Danish counterpart. The Danish Prime Minister had to make an emergency flight to Greenland to meet with local officials. They scrambled behind the scenes to find the money to match the Chinese offer. The message from the West was basically, please, for the love of God, do not take the Chinese money. We will find a way to pay for it ourselves.
So the West woke up just in time, and they managed to block the deal.
They blocked it. Ultimately, Denmark stepped in with the funding, and the Chinese bid was politely but firmly rejected.
No. This is the moment. This is the pivot I want to focus on, because this is where the strategic silence becomes the most revealing. Just imagine for a second if a major U.S. company like Bechtel was blocked from a multi-billion-dollar infrastructure deal in China because of, quote, political discrimination. What would we see?
Oh, it would be an absolute firestorm. There'd be angry tweets from senators. There would be threats of retaliatory tariffs. The company would file a lawsuit with the World Trade Organization.
It would become a major diplomatic incident. It would lead the news for a week.
Without a doubt.
But what did China do? What was their official response when they were unceremoniously kicked out of the Greenland airport deal?
Nothing.
What do you mean nothing?
I mean, absolute, complete radio silence, and they withdrew the bid. Their embassy in Copenhagen didn't issue a fiery statement condemning Denmark for caving to American pressure. The foreign ministry in Beijing didn't threaten the U.S. They just quietly packed up their briefcases and went home. Not a single word of public protest.
Why? That feels, I don't know, weak. Like they just rolled over.
It feels weak if your strategic time frame is the next 10 minutes. It is incredibly strong and patient if you are thinking in terms of the next 10 years or 20 years.
Explain that logic.
If they make a big scene, if they scream and shout and accuse everyone of being unfair, what does that achieve? It forces Greenland to publicly choose a side. It forces Denmark to officially label them as a hostile actor or a security threat. It burns the bridge permanently.
Right. It makes it impossible to come back later.
But by staying silent, by being the gracious, disappointed loser, they preserve the relationship. They can say quietly to the Greenlandic politicians behind the scenes, hey, we tried to help you guys out. It was the Americans who stopped you from getting your new airport. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
They remain the polite, helpful, well-funded alternative for the future.
So they're just waiting.
They're playing the long, long game. They know the Western governments change every 4 years. They know that defense budgets get cut. They know that maybe in 5 years, Denmark won't want to pay for the next big project, a new port or a mining railway. They know the U.S. might get distracted by a new crisis in Asia or the Middle East.
And when that happens, when that next opportunity appears,
China will still be there, quietly holding the checkbook, smiling, waiting patiently for the door to crack open just a little bit again.
it's a kind of institutional patience that is almost scary in how disciplined it is.
It is the strategic luxury of an autocratic system. Their leaders don't have to worry about the next election cycle or angry cable news headlines. They can create a 50-year plan and actually stick to it, while our democracies are busy worrying about next Tuesday's poll numbers.
So let's try and bring this all together. We have these two incredibly different case studies. We have the shield in Iran using silence to protect the immediate flow of energy right now. And then we have the key in Greenland using silence to try and patiently unlock the resources of the future.
Correct. One is defensive silence, the other is offensive silence.
When we put these two examples side by side, what is the grand synthesis? What does this tell us about the changing nature of global power in the 2020s?
I think it tells us that we urgently need to redefine what action in international relations actually looks like.
Go on with that.
We have this deep-seated misconception, and I think it's fueled by social media and the 24/7 news cycle, that quiet is the same thing as inactive. If a politician isn't tweeting about a problem, we assume they aren't working on it. If a country isn't issuing a strong statement on a crisis, we assume they don't care or they're not involved.
We interpret silence as a void, an absence of activity.
But when you look at these files, at these case studies, you realize that silence is not a void at all. Silence is a cover. The lack of words does not signal a lack of action. In fact, in many cases, the silence is what enables the most effective action.
The real action is just happening in places where we're not conditioned to look.
Exactly. It's happening in the quiet back rooms of engineering departments. It's happening in the logistics centers that coordinate the dark fleet. It's happening in the teams of geological surveyors who are quietly mapping the mineral deposits under the Arctic floor.
So while we're all watching the political puppet show, the speeches, the summits, the drama, the real structural work is happening backstage.
That's a perfect way to put it. The engineers are drafting the blueprints while the diplomats are drafting the press releases. And over the long term, the blueprints almost always win.
It's a really sobering thought. It just highlights how easily we are distracted by the spectacle of politics, by the noise.
Attention is the scarcest resource and the most valuable currency of our time. And we are spending almost all of it on the loudest, angriest voices.
Yeah.
China seems to have realized that if they just stay out of that noisy arena, they can operate with near impunity in the shadows it creates.
So let's bring this all back to the listener, to the person who's driving their car right now or washing their dishes. They aren't negotiating oil deals or bidding on Arctic airports. Why does this framework matter to them?
It matters because we are all consumers of information. We all try, in our own way, to make sense of the world, to understand where things are going.
And the sources are basically suggesting we need to develop a new skill to do that effectively.
An advanced listening skill, or maybe an advanced noticing skill.
How do we do that? What should we practically look for when we're scrolling through the news tomorrow?
The next time you see a major global crisis, a war breaks out, a critical resource becomes scarce, a major diplomatic dispute erupts, do what we've been trained not to do. Don't just look at who is shouting the loudest. Make a conscious effort to look for who is conspicuously quiet.
You have to actively identify the silence.
Yes. If a major global power like China is almost completely silent on an issue that clearly affects their core interests, that should be a massive red flag for you. Do not make the mistake of assuming they are ignoring it or that they don't have a position. Assume instead that they are working on it very actively through channels that don't require microphones and press conferences.
And then ask the critical question. What are they doing while they aren't speaking?
Precisely. That question is the key. And the answer won't be in the headlines. You'll have to look at the shipping data, look at the corporate filings for new joint ventures, look at the boring stuff, because that is where the world is actually being reshaped, far away from the cameras.
It really is funny, isn't it? We live in an age, an economy that rewards the loudest voice, the influencers, the pundits, the political firebrands.
The algorithm loves conflict. It loves noise.
But if these case studies teach us anything, it's that the most significant long-term moves, the ones that secure the energy for a nation for the next decade, or lock up the critical resources for the next century, are being made very deliberately by the people who haven't said a single word.
It is entirely possible that the future won't be shaped by the loudest person in the room. It will be shaped by the most patient and the most quiet.
That is something I am definitely going to be thinking about the next time I scroll through my newsfeed. And I really encourage you, everyone listening, to do the same. The next time a crisis hits, look for the silence. The most important part of the story is usually hiding in those quiet spaces.
It might be the only place left to hide.
Thank you so much for guiding us through this. This was a truly fascinating bit.
It was my pleasure. It's a critical topic.
And to you listening, as always, thank you for trusting us with your time and your attention.
Goodbye for now.